Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Congressman Nick LaLota. Thank you so much for joining my telephone town hall tonight. I am dialing into this call from my Washington office. I just got here this morning after a weekend in the district. I'm in the Longworth House office building at my desk. My staff is around me. They have laptops open. They are seeing your calls coming in. I appreciate you taking a moment from your busy life to discuss the matters important to you, our community, and our country. Whether you'd be otherwise eating dinner with your family or watching TV, or maybe you'd be running your kids to or from after-school activities, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to participate in this community conversation. This telephone format enables us to bring so many more people into it and to have this conversation with each other. And while we wait for more folks to hop on the phone call, I want to take a few minutes to give updates on my work in Washington, D.C. And if at any time throughout the call, if you have a question, please press *3. At any time throughout the call, if you want to sign up for our awesome newsletter, please press *6. Little background, when I ran for Congress about a year ago, I joined the Commitment to America, which is a set of promises that if I was elected, that I would fulfill while I'm here in Congress. And the Commitment to America has 4 pillars. 1, to ensure that our nation's economy is strong. 2, to ensure that we keep our community safe. 3, to create a future for our children built on freedom. And 4, to hold the government accountable to the people it serves. And I keep a card on my desk here in Washington that has these 4 pillars, that has some other key tenets within it as well. And it helps serve as a North Star of sorts, along with your feedback and the Constitution to help me stay on track and to better serve Long Islanders. That first pillar is an economy that's strong. And I know living on Long Island is expensive. It's been that way for decades, but recently with higher and higher property and state income taxes and post-pandemic higher prices driving up the cost of everything, groceries, housing, energy, I'm really committed to a stronger economy and fighting inflation. And when I got here, I wanted to work with my colleagues to get right to work on building a stronger economy and making things more affordable for you. And that's why in March, I helped pass H.R. 1, the Lower Energy Costs Act. This bill increases domestic energy production. It cuts down on government regulations. It reverses the anti-energy policies advanced by the Biden administration. It streamlines energy infrastructure. It makes it easier to export around the globe, and it boosts domestic energy production. Now, God has blessed us with so many resources as a country here. We're sitting on 43.8 billion barrels of proven oil reserves here in this country. We can safely extract them from our ground. We don't need to import them from places like Russia, Venezuela, and the Middle East where our adversaries are. And by the way, they're taking them out of the ground in less safe measures than we can take them out here. This bill helps streamline a domestic energy policy that makes sense. It's better for our national security. It's better for our economy. And it's really where we need to head as well. Now, I'm an all of the above energy Republican. I do believe that concurrent with taking what God has given us out of the ground, that we should as well tap into battery and wind and solar and other things that are more renewable. But I think we should tackle it from an all of the above perspective. Now, in a few moments, we're going to have a poll question. Everybody's going to be able to, on their touchtone phones, be able to answer a poll question. And here's going to come one at the end of what I'm going to tell you about the debt ceiling. I'm going to ask you a question at the end, and I hope that you're able to give me your feedback after I ask you this question. But last month, I worked in a bipartisan fashion to raise the debt ceiling. I worked with colleagues from both sides of the aisle to concurrently raise the debt ceiling while at the same time slashing government spending. And with our nation now being $31.9 trillion in debt, that's $95,000 for every citizen and $248,000 for every taxpayer. This town, which we haven't balanced a budget in 20 years, we need to get our act together here in Washington. So the bipartisan deal that the Speaker negotiated with the President cut government spending by $2.1 trillion. It reduced the 2024 deficit by $112 billion. And while this deal was a big win for our kids and grandkids, it was a mere first step, just the first step to getting Washington's fiscal house in order. I think that we must rein in spending without harming Social Security. We can't harm Medicare. We have to protect our defense spending, especially with a growing China. We have to protect our VA spending for our veterans who gave it all for us. and the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act, which got a large amount of Democrat and Republican votes in both the House and the Senate, was signed by the president, is a first step. So here's my question for everybody on the line. And again, you can participate by using your touch-tone phone. Now there's three narratives out there. The first narrative is that the debt ceiling deal didn't cut enough, that we should have cut more and more, despite the $2.1 trillion we spent and the $112 billion in deficit from 2024 that we reduced, that it didn't go far enough. So if you think that's the case, press 1. But press 2 if you agree with my position. If you agree that what we got was reasonably conservative enough, given the political dynamic in Washington, being that there's a Democrat in the White House. And by the way, I'll remind everybody, President Biden just like 60 days ago said that he wouldn't negotiate one penny out of this deal, that he would never tie reductions in spending to raising the debt ceiling. He wouldn't allow those two things to be coupled. And the Speaker McCarthy, moved the president off of that position and got us a deal that slashed spending by $2.1 trillion, but also protected, very important, also protected Social Security, Medicare, defense, and VA spending. So if you agree with that bipartisan solution, the one that I participate in, press 2 if you agree with that. But press 3 if you don't think that any spending should have been cut at all. Press 3 if you think that the debt that we have, $31.9 trillion, a $1 trillion deficit, 20 years of federal deficit, is an issue to you. And if that's your position, I respect it, but I want to make sure that I properly represent the three attitudes, the three narratives that are out here. So again, 1, if you think that we could have, and more importantly that we should have, but more importantly that we could have cut more. Press 2 if you think that the bipartisan deal was a good first step, and press 3 if you don't think that we should have negotiated anything whatsoever, that we should have just raised the debt ceiling without saying anything. I'm going to leave that open for a minute or two, and at the end, my staff's going to hand me a sticky, and they're going to tell me exactly how you all participated, and I'm going to tell you in a percentage terms how everybody in the call fell out to be with respect to those three options. But while you're doing that, while you're voting and pressing 1, 2, or 3, press *3 if you want to get in the queue to ask any questions. It's important. In a few minutes, we're going to get to some of those questions. And as we wait for some of those questions to come in, I also want to tell you what else I'm focused on with respect to our economy, and that's SALT. That's the state and local tax deduction. And that's where I think that Long Islanders need Washington and elected members like me, Adriel Garbarino, Anthony D'Esposito. I think you guys want us to take the next step in making things more affordable on Long Island, and that's by increasing the state and local tax deduction. And as I continue to visit communities all throughout Suffolk County, one thing remains clear: it's that SALT deduction cap has significantly hurt Long Islanders. Now, listen, I know where the problem comes from. Albany and their reckless spending. We have the dubious distinction, we as a state, of leading the nation in two specific categories. One, we have the highest taxes of any state. When you combine our property, sales, and income taxes, our taxes are higher than anybody else's throughout the country. That's terrible. We need to work on that. We need to get the governor to work on that. We need to get the majorities in Albany to work on that as well. But at the same time, unfortunately, and I think it's because of that first thing, that we lead the nation in out-of-state migration. On a percentage basis, more people leave New York State than any other state in the country. It's terrible. It's mostly because of the economic conditions here. It's mostly because of the high taxes. There are some things with respect to public safety that has exacerbated that. There are some things with respect to post-COVID policies, which I think have exacerbated that. But we need to work on those. And while we get our folks in Albany to work on those things, I'm working with some of my colleagues here from both sides of the aisle to try to increase the SALT deduction available to you all. And that's why I recently introduced the SALT Fairness and Deficit Reduction Act, which would effectively bring the deduction to pre-2017 levels for the overwhelming majority of Long Islanders, while at the same time actually reducing the federal deficit. My bill specifically would raise and extend the SALT deduction cap to $60,000 for single filers and $120,000 for joint filers beginning in 2023, and it would last until 2032. The bill that I've submitted would also index those caps to inflation. So as we've closed out that first question, and again, my staff is hopefully soon going to hand me a sticky that's going to tell me how we all did on that first question. Let's close that first question out and let's pose the second question. And the second question is this. There's a Republican bill coming before the House of Representatives soon, and it has a lot of good economic policies in there. It has a lot of tax cuts. It has a lot of incentives. It has a lot of things which will help stimulate our economy. Things I like, things that most fiscal conservatives would like. But it's missing one darn thing. It's missing SALT. It does not have our SALT deduction. So my question to you is, should I reject my own party's economic package that has some good policy in it but doesn't have SALT? So if you think I should reject that tax proposal that has some good stuff in it but doesn't have SALT, if you think I should vote against my party because it doesn't have SALT, press 1 if you think I should. But press 2 if you think that, getting a couple of wins that the whole nation can enjoy in and not getting our SALT back isn't a big deal, and that take what we can get. And if you think that we should compromise and take what's on the table, press 2 if you think that's the case. So again, I'm going to recap on this. House Republicans are proposing a measure which has a lot of good economic incentives in it, things that I legitimately think will help spur the economy, grow our tax base, give more economic opportunities to our families, good stuff. But it doesn't have SALT. It doesn't have a thing that was taken from us a couple of years ago. It doesn't have fairness. We're a state that sends way more in our tax dollars to Washington than we get back. For every dollar a New Yorker sends to Washington, we get a mere 93 cents back. That's the 5th worst return on investment of any state in the nation. And I think the way we make that right is by getting our SALT back. So if you agree with me and you think I should vote against my party's economic package until it has SALT in it, press 1. But if you think that we should just take what's on the table and compromise, press 2 if that's what you think. I appreciate that. And all right, so they just gave me the sticky on the poll on the first poll results. So 16% of you thought that it didn't go far enough. And I respect you. I think that we do need to go further and to, by the way, not touch Medicare, not touch Social Security, protect our VA spending, protect our defense spending. But 16% of you thought this bill didn't go far enough, and I respect that. I think that through the appropriations process, through a future budgeting process, we do need to continue on this track. But 49% of you thought, as I did, and would have voted how I did on the House floor, that the deal that we got was probably the best one we could have gotten on this, and 49% of you agree with my position. The bipartisan solution was probably the best that we can get. Now, 35% of you guys, now I respect you guys too. 35% of you said no way, no how. Don't negotiate budget limitations. During the raise of the debt ceiling, and 35% of you thought that way. I disagree with you guys, but I respect you, and you're certainly entitled to your opinion, and I appreciate it. We're building that queue. We're going to take our first question here in a couple minutes. Press *3 if you have a question. Please press *3. I got my staff members working both in the district office, here in the Capitol office, taking those questions. And in another minute or two, my staff is going to present a question to me that we're going to put live in the air here. So press *3 if you have one of those questions. And if you want to subscribe to our newsletter to hear about what we're doing here in Washington, we'll send you an email about once a week. We won't spam you, I promise. But if you want about a weekly update from our office about what we're doing, press *6 for that newsletter. I appreciate that. So we're going to get to our question here in about a minute. But I also want to talk to you about public safety, because ensuring the safety of our communities is one of my top priorities in Congress. I'm the son and grandson of police officers, and I believe that in modern America, none of us should have to worry about our safety when we walk around our neighborhoods and bring our kids to and from events, and to even travel into New York City. From backing the blue to securing the border to getting dangerous illicit fentanyl out of our communities and supporting a strong military, I'm working with all of my colleagues every day to keep all of us safe. I think we have a question. I'm getting a sticky here from Virginia. Virginia, I believe, is the name, not the state where the person's calling from. Staff, can you put through the call from Virginia, please?
Yes, hello, Congressman. This is Virginia. Can you hear me?
Virginia, go on ahead, please.
Yeah, hi there. I have a question on national security. We now have proof of massive data manipulation in the New York State voter roll database, which, of course, as you realize, is a national security breach to the nth degree. And as you are aware, I'm certain that the information has been peer-reviewed now in the Journal of Information Warfare. And my question to you is, what are your plans? As you probably are hearing from many of your voters, that we want all paper ballots, one-day voting with absolutely no use of machines. And I'm just calling to find out what you're going to do for our national security in that regard.
Virginia, thanks so much for the question. I totally appreciate it. I'm one of the few members of Congress who actually managed elections before he or she came to Congress. For 7 years, I was Suffolk County's elections commissioner. In Suffolk County, we have more voters than 10 states, a very robust system and process and personnel to help administer our elections. And I think that regardless of who you prefer, Republican, Democrat, Independent, that we all should have extreme confidence in our elections. So, sometimes a person that we're supporting wins, sometimes they don't. But regardless, we should all be so confident in whatever result gets put out there by the Board of Elections, we should feel confident in it. And the main reason why I feel confident in elections in New York is they're done in a bipartisan manner. That by the state constitution, each of the 62 county boards of election in New York State are equally staffed by Republican and Democrat appointees. And the rationalization for that is that each of us checks each other's work. That before an absentee ballot is sent, before a ballot is counted, before machine votes are tallied, or anything that happens in New York State's elections process, that it's always one Democrat clerk and one Republican clerk looking over each other's shoulders to ensure that the proper result, not the most politically desirable one, but the most accurate result is the one that's put forth. And that's a system that works in New York. Now, I realize people have skepticism in other states. I don't think you should have it in New York. Now, I do believe, and I think Virginia, I think that you mentioned absentee ballots. I do think that we should go to pre-COVID standards and absentee ballots. They should go to folks who are legitimately away on vacation, in hospitals, serving in the military, folks who can't leave their homes. The traditional categories that for 100 years Republicans and Democrats agreed on in New York State to participate in our elections. And by the way, both parties agreed for a long time to focus on absentee ballots for those categories, not just for everybody, not to become a mail-in ballot state, because both parties agree there's less reliability. There's no safety in the ballot box. There's no observation process. The signature checking process is terrible in New York State, by the way. So I think that folks in New York State who want to criticize our elections process, one, should feel confident that it's a bipartisan process, but two, if you have issues, I think you should focus on the absentee process and specifically the lack of legitimate signature verification. That is where I think our state officials need to do a better job. So thanks so much, Virginia, for the call. I understand that John has a question about China. Can you put John through, please, operator?
Hello?
Hey, John, it's Congressman LaLota. Go ahead with your question, please, sir.
I've got a big concern for China. From what I understand, most of our medical supplies are produced in China. And the way things are going with China, they seem to be surrounding us. And we're doing nothing about it. When are we going to do something about at least the medical supplies in this country?
Hey, thanks so much, John. Thanks so much, John, for your question. I appreciate it. I've spent some time in that part of the world. You may know that before coming to Congress, I served in the Navy. I was proud to wear a Navy uniform for 11 years. I deployed overseas 3 different times. Each time it was to the Western Pacific. I've spent some decent time off of China, off of North Korea, and that part of the world. I understand fully, John, that China has been positioning itself and attempting to expand their influence further and further into the South China Sea. Now, if you're able to dial into the Chinese leaders' brains, they think that they are the United States of the early 20th century and that right now we're Great Britain. They feel like they're on the climb and we're on the decline. And they've been positioning themselves in the world given that assumption. Now, I don't think that's the case. I think that our brightest days are ahead of us, that we can continue to be the world's superpower. But we have to acknowledge that the tensions between our two countries are high. The Chinese Communist Party has been seeking to take control over Taiwan in the coming years. We prepare them on the Armed Services Committee. I think you may know that, John. And we're preparing every day for deterring conflict. I'll say that first and foremost. I think that the number one reason our military exists is to deter conflict, that the stronger our military is and is perceived, the less likely it is that we have to use it. So fortunately, members from both parties are committed to that strategic deterrence principle that we should have a strong, armed and equipped and trained military, one the Chinese ought to fear. And I think it's imperative that leaders in our Department of Defense continue to actively deter China's growing influence. And I think deterrence is the number one thing DoD needs to be focused on. We need to keep those shipping lanes open. You know, that's the main mission of our Navy, is to keep our shipping lanes open, to keep our supply chain moving. I think that was the essence of your question, John, is that what can we do to ensure they don't disrupt the goods that we have coming across the high seas? I think that the world's finest Navy, the U.S. Navy, is first and foremost responsible for that. But I'll take it one step further, John. I think we should do more things to bring our supply chain back home. We need to make more stuff in America. You know, during COVID, we learned that getting stuff from overseas was difficult. We were very reliant upon folks from overseas. You know, we have certain policies in place, certain budgetary items, incentives specifically, to bring a lot of that manufacturing back home, especially when it has to do with national security. We need to make sure that not only are our shipping lanes clear, John, but we bring some of that stuff back home. So great question. We're on it. And I'll say this too with confidence. Fortunately, both parties in this town are on that as well. There's a bipartisan China Select Committee who meets very routinely, and these are some smart minds. One of my colleagues, Mike Gallagher, former Marine officer, is one of the heads of that committee, and he's doing a heck of a job ensuring that we learn some lessons now, hopefully on paper, so we don't have to learn them other ways later on. So appreciate the question, John. Operator, I understand you have another question maybe from Donna on border security, but before you put Donna through, I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question, press *3 if you want to get in the queue for questions. If you want to subscribe to our awesome newsletter, I promise we won't spam you. We'll send you about one email a week, and it'll tell you about what our office is doing. Press *6 if you like that newsletter. And if on any given day you have an issue with the federal government, maybe you're trying to get your passport, maybe you have a VA claim, maybe something else that you're interacting with the federal government on, call my district office during normal working hours, 631-289-1097. Again, that's 631-289-1097. We've been very successful, especially with passports. Now folks are sending their stuff into the State Department, the passport agency, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks ahead of time. They're not getting their stuff back right away. Call my office, please. We have I hate to build the expectation here, but I'm going to do it. We have had 100% success rate. If you give us 72 business hours, we've gotten everybody through to their passport. So please, if you have an issue, we're going to help you get it done. Just give us a couple of days. I got a great district staff who's been helping a lot of constituents in that. So call 631-289-1097. So operator, can you put, I think it's Donna, on a border security question through, please?
Hi, Congressman LaLota.
Hey, Donna, how are you? Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for reaching out to all of us. We appreciate this.
My pleasure.
Ask you, I'd like to know what more you can do about border security, and is there any way that you can defund or hold back funding to the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and the DOJ? You know, it just seems like things are so corrupt and out of control, and it's not going to end unless we stop funding these departments.
Thanks so much for your question. I appreciate it. I'm You may know that I'm a member of the Homeland Security Committee. I'm one of 3 Long Islanders to serve on that committee. Of course, we had Pete King serve on that committee for quite a long time, and he was the committee chairman not just once but twice. And now the 3 of us, me, Garbarino, and D'Esposito, are picking up that slack, ensuring that New York gets its focus from the Homeland Security Committee so we can protect our borders. The border that was in mind when the Homeland Security Committee was formed was the border around our nation's largest cities, which had been attacked on 9/11. But things have changed, and right now the main part of the Homeland Security Committee's focus is on our southwest border. That's because more than 1 million undocumented, unvetted people have illegally crossed our border since President Biden took office. 1 million. That's 20 football stadiums worth of people. That's more people than Rhode Island. Drugs are coming across that border every day. China's making the fentanyl. It's being smuggled across the southwest border. And fentanyl is the #1 killer of young adults between the ages of 18 and 45. The fentanyl doesn't care if you're black, brown, white, man, woman, gay, straight, rich, middle class, or poor. The fentanyl is killing so many of our young people, 100,000 since Biden took office. It's totally sad. While counties like Suffolk are dealing with that fentanyl problem, a migrant crisis is brewing too. And as you may know, the New York City Mayor, Eric Adams, and the New York City Council have bragged about making New York City, and they have made New York City a sanctuary city, which means that New York City, will not enforce federal immigration law on those who are in our country illegally. The result of this policy, the city's policy, coupled with President Biden's open border, is that New York City has now become overrun with illegal migrants and those claiming asylum. And by the way, like 70% of those asylum claims are not legitimate. They don't meet the traditional criteria of asylum. Folks are coming here for economic opportunity. And God bless, this is a country where there is a ton of economic opportunity, thankfully still. But we should be a nation of laws, and we should have a system that enforces those laws. Many of us are immigrants here ourselves. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents came here from somewhere else. I know that mine did. And what we need to get back to is have a legal immigration system. Now, while Biden and Mayorkas have their open border and the city is bragging about its sanctuary city policies, we Long Islanders should not have to bear the weight of the mess at the border and the one exacerbated by those sanctuary city policies. Listen, we're a compassionate nation. We send a lot of money overseas. We have a legitimate asylum process. We want to be a place that is compassionate, but we also are a nation of rules, and no one is above our rules and laws. And those who entered our country illegally or who are manipulating our asylum laws should not displace law-abiding citizens from their own government services. Now, in New York City, those services are becoming overrun. Veterans, the homeless, the mentally impaired, and other Americans are now being put to the back of the line or rejected services because folks who are not in this country illegally are taking those services. That, to me, is un-American. And that's why my colleagues and I in the Homeland Security Committee have honed in on Secretary Mayorkas, who is in charge of the border, and our country needs more out of Secretary Mayorkas. To the point of that funding, I think you asked the question about funding, and I think that we should endeavor to decrease or eliminate funding from those entities who are bragging about being sanctuary cities. If you won't join the federal government in enforcing our laws, why should you get the federal government's money? I think that we need to do a better job tying those two things together. Now, listen, we should give some notice to entities who would seek to not enforce our laws, and we should tell them that by next year or 18 months or whatever else, if you don't enforce those laws, we're not going to give you all the same money that we've always given you. The Congress has the power of the purse. A lot of entities rely on the federal government for their budgetary effect, and I think that we can use that as leverage to merely ask them to enforce the laws that are on the books, laws that Republicans and Democrats have agreed to for years, that we should be a nation of laws, and if you come into this country illegally, you should be held accountable. That's all we've asked, and that's all I think that we should be able to do moving forward. So I want to give you some results on that SALT poll. And just to remind you what we talked about during that SALT poll, I asked you the question that if my party presents an economic package that has some good stuff in it, has things about tax incentives and tax relief and other things that would help spur the economy, but it didn't have SALT, should I vote against it? And listen, I love this. 78, and you don't get in Long Island. Listen, we're a great people, but we disagree on a lot of Long Islanders. What do we ever agree 78% on? But 78% of you agreed with the position I'm likely to take, that if I'm not going to vote for the Republican economic package if it doesn't have SALT in it. 78% of you agreed that I should vote against my party there, and 22% of you said no, for John, and just take it. So I appreciate that feedback. Email me if you have any questions on SALT, please, and I'll be certain to read those, or any questions whatsoever. But I'd certainly appreciate that. Do we have another question coming up? All right, great. I'm sorry, that question on SALT was emailed to you guys ahead of time, so I appreciate the large number of participants there. So totally appreciate that. I want to talk about a government that's accountable for a moment while we have some more callers call in. So *3 if you have a question, *6 if you want to sign up for our newsletter. And again, if you need any help with a federal agency or an issue, call my district office at 631-289-1097. But before we get to our next question, and again, *3 if you have a question, I want to talk to you about needing to have a government that's accountable. Our government, I think, is one that is both by the people and for the people. And I think that we Americans deserve a government that answers to us, serves us, and actively works to make our lives better at every opportunity. That's one of the reasons I went off to the military. I got involved in government afterwards. I love our country. I think that if you can serve it, you should. That's something that I've done for quite some time here. I appreciate having this opportunity to serve you in Congress. And this Congress has been working diligently to hold this administration accountable for their work and their actions. Now, I recently voted on a Congressional Review Act to formally disapprove of an Environmental Protection Agency rule that will reduce nitrogen oxide emissions from heavy-duty vehicles and engines. This rule would sadly jack up vehicle costs from $2,500 to $8,300 for something like an F-250. It would likely result in an increase of $42,000 per truck, having an unconscionable effect on inflation. This is not the government that I think that we need here. So I'm happy to work with folks on the other side of the aisle when need be, but I'll stand in front of them as well. Now, I'm part of a couple different caucuses here in Congress. The one of which I think I'm most proud is the Four Country Caucus. It's a group of about 30 of us, about 15 Republicans, about 15 Democrats. Each one of us has worn the military uniform. And when we came here, we signed up for this caucus, the Four Country Caucus, agreeing that we would try to find opportunities to work with folks from another party. Now, listen, I'm a fiscal conservative. I believe in a limited government. I believe in freedom. Folks on the other side of the aisle, and I respect them, have a different view on things. But this Four Country Caucus, we're trying to get some things done in this divided government. The American people gave you a Republican House and a Democrat Senate, a Democrat White House. If you want to get something done in this town, you can't just pound your table, yell at your TV, and say this is how it's supposed to be. You have to find some folks from the other side of the aisle to work with to get your ideas passed on. So very proud to be part of this Four Country Caucus. There's some country-loving Americans who are part of it, who are even from the other side of the aisle. And we may see politics differently, but we're committed to working with each other. And that's one of the ways that we can hope to keep this government more accountable. Operator, I understand we have a question from Elizabeth. Can you put Elizabeth through, please?
Hello?
Hey, Elizabeth, it's Congressman LaLota. You're live with all the audience. Go ahead with your question, please.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I appreciate it. And you may have just answered my question, but my question was really about bipartisanship, like what I think maybe you just answered it, but my concern is about as you said, getting things done and working across the aisle and not and learning to hear the other parties, other persons of the other party as people and not demonizing them and working together for the better, for the common good. So that was my question, but you may have just answered it just now.
Well, thanks so much for the question. Yes, I did touch on it, but let me add some more. We're proud to be a spirited nation, and a lot of folks, regardless if their districts, which one of the 435 they're from, come here with a certain passion and a certain view of how to implement their ideas. Now, from a practical perspective, and I just alluded to this, like you can't get anything done in this town, at least in this current Congress, in the 118th Congress, unless you have somebody from the other side of the aisle with whom to work. So out of necessity, the bipartisanship needs to be a bigger part of how we do things. But I also think that just on regular like tone and rhetoric, I think we need to do a better job that when it is the case that somebody actually loves the country and they want to do things that are better for the country, I think that just like whether it's emotionally or spiritually or whatever, like we just need to give more of the people with whom we disagree the benefit of the doubt that they are good people and they're looking to make this place better. And that's why a couple of the caucuses I'm part of, I referenced the Four Country Caucus. I'm also part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is much like that first one I mentioned, but it does not have that having to be a foreign military veteran in it. I think the bipartisan debt deal was emblematic of the necessity of our government. Now, I do believe fiscal conservatives are darn right on the debt and on the deficit. Now, I'll respect folks who disagree with me. I think that a nation that's $31.9 trillion in debt, that has $1 trillion deficit every year, who hasn't balanced a budget in 20 years, I just think that that's wrong, and that's going to burden our kids and grandkids with too much, and we're going to take opportunities away from them unless we get our debt in line. Now, I respect those who may have a different take on it. I would ask them to show me the math on how this situation gets better, how at 120% debt to GDP, how it possibly could be. And that's, by the way, the highest since World War II. How possibly our kids and grandkids could absorb that trend that's going to be 130 or 140, 150% in just a couple of 5 years. I don't think that the math would validate an argument different than mine. But the nice thing is I'm willing to put myself in rooms of folks who have different ideologies and talk to them about that. And I think that I don't want to paint this with two rose-colored glasses here, but like I think that temperament is getting better in this town. That it's not the case that everybody just wants to just have it their way and shout and shout and shout until they get it their way. I think there's a decent amount of pragmatists in Washington, and I'm eager to work with them every day. So totally appreciate your question. Do we have another question, operator? And while we dig up another question here, we're going to wrap this up here in a few minutes. We've been going for more than 40 minutes, so we're going to wrap up in a few minutes. If we have one more question, we may take it. But again, press *3 if you have a question, *6 if you want to get our newsletter, and if you ever need any help on a federal issue, press 631-289-1097. And do we have another question?
Yes, Congressman, we have a question from Cheryl. It was emailed in earlier asking, what are you doing about the SALT limitations on New York?
All right. Thanks so much. We kind of covered this earlier, but I'm happy to go into it again. I'm so passionate about getting our SALT back. I've put my legislative team on marching orders to ensure that we communicate with as many of my colleagues as possible. I'm looking at a stack of what we call pocket cards here. These are like 4x9 index cards that we put in our suit jacket pockets. We hand to our colleagues on the floor that generally represent our feelings on a specific bill. And I have a stack of these cards right here, and I'm looking at it right now. SALT, Fairness and Deficit Reduction Act. That's the bill that I sponsor. You can Google it if you like. Generally speaking, that would increase the cap from the $10,000 is right now to $60,000 for individuals and $120,000 for married couples. And I think it's important that we get that deduction back. I want to get it back this Congress. I'm going to fight tooth and nail. Congressman Swazi, while he was here, had this no salt, no dice moniker he adopted. I don't want to, there may be a copyright, so I don't want to infringe anything there, but I'm willing to do a lot to draw a line in the sand on SALT. I referenced earlier, and 78% of you agree with me earlier on, that I should vote against my party's economic package if it doesn't have SALT in it. I'm part of a bipartisan SALT caucus. There's a number of us suburban lawmakers, generally from blue states, I think exclusively from blue states, by the way, where the taxes are especially high, who are banding together looking for opportunities to make things better. As we know, getting any relief here is going to be a multiple-step process, getting something through the House, getting something through the Senate and signed by the President. We tried to submit an amendment to the debt ceiling deal, but There were no amendments allowed whatsoever, regardless of how popular or not the amendment was. The House wasn't taking amendments to it, so we didn't get through there. But I'm going to keep on trying, and I'll keep you posted on this. But I'm at it every day, so I appreciate it. We've gone 45 minutes. I appreciate your time tonight. This is a long time for you folks to be on the call, so I appreciate that. We're going to wrap up. And let me close by saying this. Thank you. Thank you for having the confidence in me to serve in this capacity. I love this country. I've served it wearing a military uniform. My father and grandfather served it wearing a police uniform. My brother served it wearing a Marine uniform. My stepfather was a Navy man. This is really an honor for me to do this job, to take my love of this country to this town, to try to find practical ways to make our lives better, whether that's on the border, whether that's with China, that's with our debt, our economy, the salt, protecting our environment. We didn't get to Plum Island tonight, but Plum Island focused on it as well. It's an honor for me to be able to do this job on Long Island's behalf. I appreciate your confidence, appreciate you dialing in tonight. We'll do another one of these in a month or two. Be on the lookout on our social media. You can find me on social media. But please call my office if you need anything. Visit my website. It's quite informative. But I appreciate spending some time with you tonight. God bless. We live in the greatest country the world has ever known. I appreciate you trusting me to represent to you in the Congress. Be well. Enjoy the night.